Welcome back to the Mayorverse, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Mayor Reynolds, aka Midnight Mayor, here, coming at you with another Deadrop video. And today I want to discuss the weapons and potential future weapons that we could potentially see in Deadrop. I want to be right up front. This video is hugely speculatory. There's no information to support these per se, but I'm going to start with some weapons that are in the game now that I think could be reworked. And then take a look at the weapon meta of Deadrop as it exists and try to think about future weapons. We don't know how we're going to get more weapons, if, when, could they do a seasonal model where every season we'll see a new weapon introduced or something once the game actually launches in season 0, which is expected in 2024. We don't know, but I thought it'd be fun to think about what weapons we might see in the future of Deadrop and talk about all these things. So let's start. So my first idea is actually to rework the auto pistol, which I just had in my hand in this gameplay right here, and actually make it a second SMG. And I think there's room for this in the meta. They have at least 2 SMGs. We've got several shotguns, several rifles. There's a variety of things here. And I think if we take this pistol, which is very strong, and you spawn with this gun, the auto pistol, as a sin. And it's really a solid weapon. You can really ape people with it, kind of put it away, sprint in, and then just beam people from the hip. Or, of course, ADS. And then with an extended mag, it's even stronger. I think it's a little bit too strong to start with, honestly, as a sin. Because it's really, you can use it competitively and go up against a lot of different styles of play with it. So I think it should be reworked as an SMG. I'm thinking something like a Vector, something that maybe you leave the damage on it the same, but you give it a slightly bigger magazine and just make it shoot very, very fast. Vectors are usually high risk, high reward style weapons where if you dump a whole clip into somebody, they're going to be they're not even going to have a chance to react. They're just going to be down and out. So I think there is room for a second SMG, and I think they could use the auto pistol as a basis for it, so long as they don't let sins spawn with that reworked, what I'm explaining as hypothetical SMG. Next up is the heavy pistol, which I don't have gameplay footage for here, because right now it's really not worth using. There's so many other guns available. You could use virtually any other gun in the game right now over the heavy pistol, and you would be better off. So I would really like to see the heavy pistol reworked, almost to be like a Desert Eagle or a Magnum. Right now it looks like a revolver in the game, which is fine. I love revolvers, Magnums, Desert Eagles. It's a great playstyle, right? Everybody loves that very powerful handgun fantasy, but that's the way it needs to play. 6 shots is fine, but it needs to be able to just destroy people in like 3 or 4 shots. I'm thinking like even if they have good armor, you would want to down somebody in like 4 shots with this thing, or maybe two shot them in the head. It's just speculatory, but I think for a gun that only holds 6 bullets right now, it's not strong enough to make it worth using. I'd like to see it converted into a gun with a higher skill ceiling that feels really satisfying when you pick somebody off with 2 headshots with it or something like that. And it's also, right now in the game, you can create some monstrosities with this thing by strapping an 8x scope on it, which can be really, really fun. And almost like, what Kurt Russell movie was it where he used a revolver with a giant scope on it in the 80s? I can't remember, but a reworked heavy pistol would be great for the meta. So next up is actually a second LMG, and I'm not normally a huge fan of LMGs in games, I'm gonna be honest. In Call of Duty, Apex, most of the time I feel like they're a little unwieldy. They're not my play style. They usually run a little bit slower when you're carrying. The ADS time takes, more time than I would like. You kind of feel at a disadvantage when you're up close, when you're trying to ADS, or even at mid-range, and you take a few seconds to pull it up. But with that said, we have one in the game right now. It's a rifle, but it is essentially an LMG, larger magazine. It's fairly decent. I've been using it some more since my gun tier list video, and the hip fire on it is really strong with a laser on it, actually. And I'm gonna get a guy with hip fire right here. Again, there's not much of a jumping penalty when you shoot it either, so you can kind of, I don't want to say exploit that, but you get what I mean. But I think a second LMG would actually work fairly well. Something maybe that shoots slower, like a 50 cal with a smaller magazine, where you kind of got to be more careful with your shots than a steady stream of bullets than the LMG that's in the game right now. But a second LMG could be fun, something like the Rampage in Apex Legends or something along those lines. Again, not my favorite gun, not my favorite style, but I could absolutely see it fitting in the Deadrop meta, whether that be way down the road or whatever. Next up on this speculatory list is something like an AK-47, a rifle that has high recoil but perhaps higher damage than the rifle that we have now. There's most games, to be honest, have some type of AK or AK-inspired weapon. You know, Counter-Strike, Valorant, Call of Duty, Apex with a flatline. PUBG's got several AK-like weapons, so I would be surprised if we didn't get an AK-like weapon sometime in Deadrop down the road. We'll see what happens, but as I think about what styles of weaponry may we see down the road be added to Deadrop, this came to mind. So this idea was inspired by variants and founders passes. You can see here, this guy clearly has some type of bow on his back. Now bear in mind that because something is on a variant does not necessarily mean that Midnight Society will implement it into the game. There are variants with RPGs on their back. I don't think RPGs are going to come to the game at any point. I just don't see it working. I really hope they don't, because I hate RPGs in Call of Duty. But anyway, I'm trying to think, you know, outside the box. So we got our traditional weaponry, of course, that's all fun, but what could they do unique to this setting, or something unique? So there's bows, right? Compound bows, crossbows. But then this is almost like a cyberpunk alternate reality type future where the 80s and 90s continued. We're in the year 2020B. So what kind of weird, you know, future tech could we think of beyond bows? You know, do we get an actual laser style gun, something like that, or some kind of tech like Gauss from Halo, something outside the box that would be unique to Deadrop, unique to the setting. It's maybe something to do with the climate wars, you know. I wrote a short story that had a bomb that was inspired by ozone, you know, something like that, like some type of weaponry that has to do with the environment. I'd really like to see something like that down the road, something that's unique to Deadrop, unique to this setting, almost like a signature gun. Even if it's niche, that's fine. I think we'll see something like that at some point. All right, so next up are melee weapons, and I did a video about this. Will Deadrop have melee weapons in it? And my thinking on this has changed quite a bit since I did that video. You can find that video on the channel, though, which you should totally subscribe to if you want more Deadrop and Midnight Society content. But anyway, a lot of our variants have melee weapons in them. Here's a crowbar. Here's an axe. There's tomahawks. There's baseball bats. I think is that a baseball bat or a steel pipe? There's all sorts of melee weapons being displayed here. Again, this does not mean there's swords. This does not mean that Midnight Society is necessarily going to implement melee weapons. I do think the game will probably get a melee feature at some point, because right now we don't have one at all. You cannot melee. I hope that unlike other games, the melee is not like kind of OP, you know, like an Apex, it does like 30 damage when you melee somebody, but when you shoot them with an SMG, it does like 13. But what I would like to see is some kind of system, speaking of Apex, which I'm referencing a lot in this video, maybe instead of, you know, individual melee weapons that all need to be individually balanced and all that stuff, I got thinking, what if it's the same melee feature, but we used an Apex heirloom style system where your character could essentially have a melee weapon skin of some type. So it does the same amount of damage no matter what. It's not a wholly different weapon. You have to balance. Of course, you have to design it and animate it and such. But then you could have axes and swords and baseball bats and crowbars. But it's not going to be something that has to be individually balanced and added to the loot pool. It's just your particular character's melee weapon. I'd like to see something like that. That's how I'd like to see these melee style weapons that could be inspired by our variants implemented. Okay, then there's grenades, and this one gets really funky. If you look at some of the variants here, there's several different styles of grenades. And you know, right now we have smoke grenades. You can obviously see frag grenades being implemented. Then there's the natural incendiary grenade. But there's some other stuff that's shown in the variants. And again, because it's on a variant does not mean Midnight Society will necessarily use it or implement it. These are conceptual. They're fantasy. Before the game, we even had a snapshot yet. These things were conceptualized. So no promises. But look at this. This looks like, is this some type of gas grenade? If you go back, there's, you know, obviously frag grenades are one thing. There's a different color. This one's like blue, lightish. Is that an ice grenade, an electric grenade? You can run wild with the concepts, right? Again, like an ozone grenade, you throw one and people can't breathe in that area. I just made that up. Different types of grenades, though. Obviously, frag would be the most natural one to come next. is something that we may see down the road. And last but not least is the weapon mod system. If you haven't noticed yet, if you shift left click items in your inventory, you'll be able to pull up this screen where you can customize them a little more in depth. But there's a weapon mod slot on all the guns. Right now there is one weapon mod in the game. It is extremely rare. It looks like something of a computer chip or a flash drive. This weapon mod increases fire rate and damage output, but increases spread and recoil. If you find this thing, you're actually going to take it in with you, which I don't recommend because it's so rare, unless you really just want to test it and see what this thing does. I would put it on something like a sniper or a DMR, where you're not going to really pay for it. You'll get the increased damage and fire rate, but you're not going to pay that much for the spread or recoil. You're not really going to be shooting this from the hip. You know, the SMG or the LMG, you're really going to feel more of that penalty for the spread and recoil on those guns. But with weapon mods, they could do a variety of things. Again, like grenades, the options are limitless. Do they do incendiary rounds? Do they add a silencer weapon mod? They could do that with barrels, by the way. Always an idea. But I was thinking maybe instead of just doing it as a barrel, do it as a weapon mod. Do they have bullets with a weapon mod that slow you down when you get hit by them? The ideas are endless, right? But I do think they could really do some cool things with the weapon mod slot, get kind of creative and totally change weapons up without having to balance them too much, as long as they're very, very rare. That's it for this video, guys. Thanks for watching. Remember, this video is entirely speculatory. There is no evidence in the game or outside the game within the Midnight Society website, within the files, to support any of this stuff. These are my ideas about the Deadrop weapon meta and what might come down the road. I just thought it would be fun to speculate about what further weaponry we might see in the future of Deadrop. And we'll, you know, obviously the first thing they have to do is get the current weapons balanced. They've got some work to do there that I've talked about a little bit in other videos. Make sure you check those videos out. Subscribe to the channel if you want more Deadrop and Midnight Society content, because we're pumping it out as fast as we can, and we're working hard to be the #1 source for Deadrop and Midnight Society news. So with that said, Midnight Mayor out. See you in the next video. This video is sponsored by G Fuel. Use code MAYOR at any time to get 20% off your order at G Fuel on gfuel.com or the G Fuel app. Just go to the website, select one of their many, many, many amazing flavors in both tubs, cans, G Fuel hydration, whatever G Fuel products you want. Use code MAYOR at checkout to get 20% off. I guarantee you're gonna feel hyped when you drink G Fuel. Come watch my streams if you need any more evidence of that. Get some G Fuel today. Use code MAYOR for 20% off. And thanks to G Fuel for sponsoring all of our content.